Let's bring in Anna Bower, a legal fellow and courts correspondent for Lawfare. She's been inside the courthouse this morning. So, good morning. What have you noticed and seen this morning?
Right. So this morning we had the continued cross-examination of Michael Cohen, and it once again was a bit of a meandering performance from Todd Blanche. At times, he covered ground that he already has covered many times before during his cross-examination over the past several days. He's focused on Michael Cohen's credibility, portraying him as someone who is a liar, someone who's motivated by fame and money. But there were two substantive portions of the cross-examination that I think are important to point out. One is that Michael Cohen did testify that there was some legal work that he did for Donald Trump in the early months of 2017. That, of course, goes to the defense's key point that they are likely to argue in closings, which is that these reimbursement payments, in fact, were payments for legal expenses, just as they were marked in the Trump Organization ledgers. Prosecutors, of course, allege that that was a false statement. The second aspect of the cross-examination that I think is important to point out is the focus on these phone calls that occurred around the time that Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels the hush money in the lead up to the 2016 election. There are these two key calls that occur on the very day that Michael Cohen goes to open the bank account to pay Stormy Daniels. Those calls with Donald Trump, the defense elicited testimony in which they had Michael Cohen say that, yes, there were other things that maybe he was working on for Trump at the time. For example, they discussed a potential extortion plot against Tiffany Trump, Donald Trump's daughter. And so they were trying to make this argument in which they were saying that to the jurors that there were other things that potentially Michael Cohen could have talked to Donald Trump that morning that didn't relate to Stormy Daniels. But Michael Cohen did stand his ground saying, no, I recall that it was about the Stormy Daniels matter because that was what was most important to me at the time.
And Anna, just curious to get what you've observed of Cohen's demeanor, how he's answering questions today versus the other days he's been on the stand, and Donald Trump's demeanor, if you can see him from your vantage point in the courthouse.
Right. So once again, Michael Cohen has a demeanor that is very calm and cool and collected, not his typical bombastic self as people know him to be. It's not the Michael Cohen that appears on the podcast. It is the Michael Cohen we've seen in court, who has remained very calm. We also have Donald Trump continuing to have his eyes closed throughout the testimony of Michael Cohen. Again, it's unclear if he is sleeping or if he's listening, but he has kept his eyes closed for most of the day. I have been in the overflow room, so I haven't been able to see the faces of the jurors, but I will say that I'm told by colleagues who have been in the courtroom that the jurors at time during this somewhat meandering performance by Todd Blanche appeared to be shifting in their seats, a little bit bored. So I think that particularly if the jurors are feeling how I was feeling at times during Todd Blanche's performance this morning, they may be thinking that this is ground that has already been covered on the previous days of the cross-examination. But we do expect Todd Blanche to wrap up this cross-examination sometime today.
Yeah, Anna, indeed, Merchan is back in the courtroom. All the parties are present, and it's all the process of getting everybody back in. And Anna, just if you could expand a little bit about what you're saying about Blanche not being pinpoint specific. How did you, in what ways was that manifested?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you say that again?
About Blanche, you were saying that it wasn't his questioning was meandering or not specific. In what ways would you say that was represented?
Right. So there's been this is the fourth day of Michael Cohen's testimony. This is the multiple days of cross-examination that we've had here. We have heard before, for example, about how much money it is that Michael Cohen has made off of his podcast, off of his books. Those are podcasts and books, some of which are focused on Trump. We've heard many statements elicited in which Michael Cohen said, yes, these are conversations I've had on these podcasts that are about Donald Trump, in which which I have said that I do hope that he is held accountable and goes to jail. And so once again, the defense elicited a lot of testimony from Michael Cohen in which he talked about the fact that he has made over $4 million. So again, focusing on things like that we've already heard over and over and over again. And potentially the strategy there is just really try to hammer home with the jurors that this is a guy who is motivated by money. He has made a career off of, or so they say, he has made a career off of making podcasts and books about Donald Trump. He's made money from that. He's motivated by fame. We again heard a lot about Michael Cohen's relationships with reporters. We heard about how he consistently speaks to reporters. He did say that even after his testimony last week, he spoke to some reporters over the weekend and in the intervening days. But he said that it was not about this case. But I think that the defense is trying to underscore to the jurors that Michael Cohen may be someone who is motivated by fame, and that that's one of the motivations he may have for testifying against Trump in the way that he is. So I think that that is just some of the ways that we've seen Todd Blanche come back to subjects that have already been heard before.
Ana Bauer, thank you so much. We so appreciate your perspective.